Welcome to the HR Data Labs podcast, now part of the Work Defined Podcast Network. Join us as we explore the vital role of compensation, strategy, data, and people analytics in navigating today's complex business world. With the resources of Work Defined, we're bringing you deeper insights and actionable ideas from top HR experts. Now, here are your hosts, David Turetsky and Dwight Brown. Hello and welcome to the HR Data Labs podcast. I'm your host, David Turetsky, and we have a very special guest today, Sarah Smart. Sarah, how are you?
I'm really well. Thanks for asking, David. How are you?
I'm really good. It's a beautiful, what feels like fallish day in September, and it's nice and cool in the morning, and it's not too hot in the afternoon. It's perfect.
I agree.
Favorite time of the year. Anyways, why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
Sure, I'd love to. Well, first of all, David, thank you for having me on.
Pleasure.
I'm a big fan. So
Thank you.
I'm really excited to be here. A little bit about me. I'll start with the personal. I live in Washington, D.C. with my family, 2 kids, a dog, a husband, the works. I've been in talent acquisition for the majority of my career. The route up was circuitous, as anyone has in talent acquisition. No one wakes up and says, that's the job for me in talent acquisition. But started an executive search and then was fortunate to work for companies that helped me to expand my skill set and my capabilities moving into global roles, running large-scale recruiting functions. So, most recently, I was at JPMorgan Chase, where I led the product organization for talent acquisition in the Chase recruiting organization.
Oh, wow.
And it was a blast. We did implementation of some amazing work, a remarkable team, and I'm really proud of the work that we did together. Prior to that, I was at Hilton, where I ran global recruitment, and a really wonderful experience. That company has my heart and always will. It is an amazing place to work. Just a little shout out to Hilton. And then earlier in my career, I led global executive recruitment at Accenture, Freddie Mac, and a couple of others. But most recently, I have left the world of corporations and have founded my own company called Horizon Human with my business partner. And we focus on helping HR executives navigate the intersection of technology, business process, and change in order to really help adopt and, help adoption and support of new technology. And a big part of our work is also helping them think through the new structure of their organization. And I obviously spend a lot of time in talent acquisition, but also been doing some work in talent development as well.
Well, very storied career. But before we go on, Sarah, what's one fun thing that no one knows about Sarah Smart?
I mean, listen, I'm kind of an open book. So I had to think about this. This question. I knew it was coming. So I am, this will be the first time I've actually said it to anyone. I am writing a screenplay that's loosely informed by my experience working in corporate America. It's actually one of the ways that I unwind is, a creative activity. It's not quite to prime time yet, but if anyone knows any good agents, I've got some funny stories to tell.
Very good qualification on good agents, and hopefully someone will suggest some for you. But that's amazing. That sounds like a lot of fun. I think that I do a lot of that kind of, well, not screenplays, but I write graphic novels about HR, and
it's so awesome.
It's just so much fun.
Yeah.
Use that creativity and to channel that energy into something positive that makes people smile.
Exactly. I also believe in the theater of the absurd. So,
That's great. I'll have to send you, I wrote a screenplay a really long time ago, which would probably make you laugh. It's a short play and never been made, but I'll send it to you and hopefully
I'd love to see it.
Okay, cool. Well, today's topic is one that we've talked about a tremendous amount on the HR Data Labs podcast. It is and has been a concern of a lot of HR people for a few months now and a few years now on the HR Data Labs podcast. We've been talking about artificial intelligence in the world of HR since 2022. But now that it is hitting its peak and prime time, AI is going to impact the world of HR pretty tremendously. So why don't we dive right in?
Have you ever been to a webinar where the topic was great, but there wasn't enough time to ask questions or have a dialogue to learn more? Well, welcome to HR and Payroll 2.0, the podcast where those post-webinar questions become episodes. We feature HR practitioners, leaders, and founders of HR, payroll, and workplace innovation and transformation, sharing their insights and lessons learned from the trenches. We dig in to share the knowledge and tips that can help modern HR and payroll leaders navigate the challenges and opportunities ahead. So join us.
So our first question for you is, why don't you tell us about, because you have a great background in talent acquisition, as you had described, tell us about your experience with artificial intelligence in the world of talent acquisition.
It's a great question because I know that HR Data Labs has been covering it for several years now, and I know it's a new topic, but I'll challenge that. And I'll say that that AI in HR and specifically in TA has probably been around for about a decade, if not longer. I certainly got my first experience with AI way back in 2015 with a company that I shall not name that provides video interviewing support and was building their interviewing support as a selection tool with a quote unquote black box algorithm at the time. And that was from my introduction to the good and the not so good of AI and HR. Let's say that sort of 10 years on, I would have implemented differently. I would have asked different questions. I've gotten wiser, years of experience.
Right.
And I'm excited about what's coming. And I'll just say that. But it has to be designed and adopted. It's not a flip the switch and turn it on. And you actually, as a TA leader, need to expand your knowledge to understand what you're actually doing, or you could get yourself and your organization in trouble that you could avoid.
I think we've seen, especially with some of the litigation that's happened for some of the technologies, where some of the organizations have implemented these technologies and probably not done as much due diligence as necessary in order of understanding the switches flipped one way or another that could configure the technology differently and make it a better experience for not only the recruiters, but for the candidates as well. Have you seen that kind of issue where, I'm not going to say it's blind allegiance, but it's more, I also don't want to call it laziness, but that the technology implementations kind of run over the recruiting teams and the HR teams?
I see that all the time. It's actually a big part of our work is helping our clients become better clients and better purchasers, better implementers. And so, what I have experienced, I won't name the companies, right? But, I've experienced major organizations that purported to have, and this is in the past 3 years, purported to have AI in their tool set that would reduce your talent acquisition structure by, 30 heads, 100 heads. It depends on, how you're implementing it. And after really diving deep, understanding that the tool that they offered not only didn't work, but didn't work in such a way that it was creating a potentially biased experience for candidates and certainly a risk for the organization. It was only after digging and having the resources available to me to dig, right? So it's not just talent acquisition leaders that have to have the great questions. It's now a team sport.
Right.
It is working hand in hand with legal and having a great partnership there. It is working hand in hand with your data scientist teams. It's working hand in hand with your engineering teams to really understand how tooling works in any product that you're purchasing and whether or not that tooling is going to work for your use case. And then, of course, once you've determined that it works for your use case, how are you monitoring if it has AI in it that it's actually functioning the way it's supposed to, and that it's not creating bias on a regular basis.
Which is one of the keys to some of this litigation is the created bias. And I think all of us that have been in HR for quite some time, we've all thought through the ethics of bias, not just in the technology world, but also just in hiring and making decisions. And that's why I wanted to go back to one of the things you just said, which is you help companies think about the processes and becoming better consumers. I think a lot of times people cede that process to the technology. Like, they figured it out, it's better. When one of the things that I implore clients to do is to build the best process you can, build the best data governance you can, build the best data set you can prior to an implementation of HR technology, rather than making those decisions during implementation when you can't possibly make all those decisions during implementation.
So I think this is where it comes into helping our clients be better clients during implementation, right? It is if they weren't able to do that, but they already are in implementation, that they're really having structured discovery sessions around what they want the future state to be, and that there is a change expert in the room talking through, okay, great. So we're going from here to here. How does that change how people's work is being done? How does that change candidate experience, hiring manager experience? And I've been known to focus on recruiter experience, right?
Right, of course.
So, how does the design sessions need to be built on the foundation of understanding current processes, and the number of clients that I've had who don't even understand their current processes.
Exactly.
Right? Like it's sort of been like that in the back of the head of some master recruiter somewhere. So getting all of that out on paper, but then saying, great, we're going to deliberately design the future state. We're not going to let this technology dictate the future state for us. We're going to design what we want based on outcomes, as opposed to just letting the technology carry us along. And I think that's what you're saying too, right?
Absolutely.
The tech shouldn't drive your process. You should drive your process.
But one of the problems, though, is that in order to be able to deliver on a promise or an ROI, they have to focus on certain things. Like you mentioned before, headcount gets reduced is one of the ROI promises of this implementation. And you and I both know that it usually isn't, especially right away, it usually isn't the outcome that we're hoping for. It's the outcome that might happen given the successful implementation. And so one of the concerns I have about the ROI being about headcount in the recruiting or in the HR function is that people are going to be designing their exit strategy. Mm-hmm. And why are they going to design a good exit strategy? They're going to design failure so that they stick around. Mm-hmm. So I guess what I'm saying is that walking in with that kind of a backdrop probably isn't the best idea. Walking in with the design of, we're going to create the best talent acquisition scenario for the future, the talent acquisition process for the future, and for what we understand the company's future to be. Well, yes. They need to have that as an informed part of that process, right?
It 100%. And that's why I say outcomes based, right? As opposed to, and if one of your outcomes is efficiency, great. That means that you're looking at probably throughput. How fast can you hire? But if one of your outputs is quality, then you're really taking a different, outcomes is quality. You're really taking a different tact in terms of your approach. I have been asked to design in my career numerous business cases that hung on headcount, right? We invest in this technology and then we can get the headcount, and then we get the headcount saved.
Sure.
And I, have seen this with my clients as well. And what I'll always say, especially when I'm working with CHROs, is, hey, if you're implementing, software as a service, you're buying one of the big HCMs, or we'll use that example. You're going to need an entirely new team that sits either in HR or technology that is configuring the system, that is managing the system, that's managing releases, that's tracking bugs, you've got a feature team and a bug team. And that's a huge investment. And so if you just made a commitment to buy this by reducing 17 recruiter heads, you're not getting what you need because you're going to have to spend more money to make this thing dance. And then you start getting into AI, and it's an even different question. You buying an AI tool, great. How are you monitoring that? How are you ensuring that your data is good enough to go into it to actually make it work?
Absolutely.
That's you need data scientists, you need data architecture, you need legal teams that are fluent in AI and employment law. And that's, again, a totally different investment for a company that many don't factor in when they go out to buy these products.
Absolutely right. I want to come back to a couple of thoughts that you had in there because you had a lot of great things that I want to dive into. But one of the things you talked about was the outcomes, and you talked about the data to be able to measure the outcomes, but you also talked about those outcomes and the metrics to do that. And the one thing that we've been talking about on the HR Data Labs podcast since the beginning of our podcast, almost 5 years ago, is the ability for people to measure effectively. Mm-hmm. And what we're talking about here is being able to get ROI out of a technology investment, but measuring that investment from looking at the current process versus the future state, having goals set for the future state, and then being able to hypothesis test that future state.
100%.
Means you have the measurements locked down, so you know what they are today. You know what you want to get to as your future state. And then you're trying to figure out along the way, what's our days to fill, what's our recruiter efficiencies, what are the number of candidates we disposition. There are so many wonderful metrics you can choose. Pick a few. Pick ones that are useful for your business and attack.
They're aligned to your business goals, 100%.
Exactly.
They need to be aligned to your business goals, right? So if you're measuring on quality, but your business cares more about speed, that's the wrong metric. It's logic, but it is also, you can sometimes see TA organizations and HR organizations in general kind of boiling the entire ocean with a whole bunch of metrics that don't mean a lot. Yep. So, pick the ones that are most meaningful for you. And you need to do that with people that know how to do that.
Well, and you had mentioned a few of those as you were going through the kind of skill sets that you need in order to maintain the new technology stack.
I'm really passionate about that.
Excellent
conversation. So, yeah.
Well, one of the things I'd say is hire them before the transition. Hire them at the front end where they can fix your data model, they can do the measurements, and then as you're going through the process, they can help lead you through 100%. The governance model, the ethics, the AI ethics, all of the conversations, all of the decision-making, and all the measurements. So they can show you, hey, if you make this decision, it's going to impact this measurement, and we're going to do testing on it throughout to make sure. It's kind of like when you're opening your pool for the summer, you use tests of the water to make sure that it's something you can swim in. Well, you got to do it. You can't do it just once. You got to keep doing it over time to make sure that either the pH is right or there's no bacteria in it or whatever. You can't just stake that claim and say, oh, we've achieved our ROI. No, you got to keep testing it throughout the entire process.
You have to keep testing it, not just through the implementation process, but once it's implemented. And, this is very specific to AI tools in general. You have to have compliance monitoring. It's Absolutely. Not a one and done. It is up and it is running, and it is, if you're using a large language model, it is changing its data inputs, very, very quickly. And you need to understand that. But I'd also say that business goals change, right? So Absolutely. A KPI related to speed might have been appropriate for a recruiting organization in 2021, right? When we were all scrambling for candidates, there were not enough recruiters in the marketplace, and we all remember those days. Mm. But today, when the market is slow, one might say, right? You're probably more focused on quality. So what are the metrics that help you measure quality as a leader? And shifting the emphasis, is the business leader's responsibility to continue to keep it aligned to outcomes and business goals.
And do you think that because it's a little bit slow, this is the right time to start doing a transition in the skills that are needed in the TA world?
100%. It is, I mean, it's slow, right? I think that, I talk to my friends that are, in corporations, there are still, recruiters aren't feeling particularly stable in their roles, right? And I don't
think anybody's particularly stable in their roles right now.
Fair comment. But for recruiters in particular, this is an opportunity to change their skill set and potentially even learn new things. But I think that we're in this world where you could invest in new technology and bring your team along. It will be a little less challenging to make those changes now, because what goes down, what in volume, comes back up. And that has been our experience time and time again. And we are definitely operating in a totally new world right now. So, I can't begin to predict the cycles, but it always comes back.
Enjoying the conversation? Don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode packed with insights and strategies. Now, let's dive back in. Well, so let's hit the second question now, because I think this is going to go exactly where you're talking about, which is how will talent acquisition, the structure and the skills needed, how will those things evolve over the next 2 years?
I love this question. So can I just take it role by role? Would that be okay?
You may, absolutely.
So I'm gonna start sort of at the foundation of talent acquisition, not necessarily, and I'm going to stay in the talent acquisition function at least to start. So coordinators, coordinators have been the jack of all trades inside of TA organizations forever. They are critical partners in many sophisticated recruiting organizations. They do much more, in my experience, than managing scheduling, although that seems to be what everyone sort of hooks on, is that's what a coordinator does, right? Managing, I've worked with coordinators that manage onboarding, they serve as QA, they also schedule interviews. But I think AI is going to change the work mix for coordinators. And I'm going to say something controversial. I have not seen anyone get a tool right for automated interview scheduling. And that is what everyone wants to do, because they think that changes the role of coordinator. You need less coordinators immediately. I would say take another look at it and say, what are the AI tools that are going to change the focus of a coordinator from doing this jack of all trades role to really focusing on the candidate experience? I see QA responsibilities and onboarding experience that can be AI enabled. It can be fully automated through journeys. It can be delivered through technology while not really losing that human touch. And that frees up the coordinators to really focus on the candidate experience. Would you eventually maybe need less coordinators if you had been able to automate some of that work away? Potentially, but that's not the business I would go after. I would go after candidate experience. And say that we want to free up coordinators' time in order to really focus on the candidate experience. I also finally believe that in-person interviews are coming back with a vengeance, making that human touch of coordination even more important, and an opportunity to really, sort of set your company apart if you invest in this area from a candidate experience perspective.
So the recruiting coordinator, I've always thought about them as kind of the glue or the spackling that makes the polished look for the organization. They're the people who have created that hook that the organization needs to make that candidate feel like they want to be a part of something, not just shuffled through a process that you keep going from technology to technology, whether it's an Outlook invite or whatever. But having a smiling face on the end of a call or even a Zoom or whatever, somebody you get to know, someone who represents the culture and represents the not the onboarding, but represents the how do you think you're going to fit in this organization? Yeah. I haven't seen a technology yet who can automate that cultural part of feeling a part of the organization using technology. I don't get that. So I think of that recording coordinator as serving a critical role of being basically the brand ambassador in the recruiting process.
100%. I'm completely aligned. And, if you take away, someone's got to do a new hire report, someone's got to do an onboarding report, all of that sits with coordinators. You can automate that now, and you can automate that with accuracy and with minimal investment. Doing that work again, frees up your coordinators to be that, that defining feature that may make it and may make the difference between a candidate saying, yes, I want to come work for this company. Right. No, I don't. So sourcing, like, oh my gosh, the cornucopia of AI enablement available for good sourcing. I started my career as an executive recruitment researcher, and I'm jealous of what they have now. It is so exciting, but it also starts to combine roles a little bit, right? So there's just-in-time research to optimize candidate outreach to, what I'm calling AI-enabled programmatic media, where you start to combine the roles of talent marketing or talent acquisition marketing and sourcing, and they start to become much closer to being one. Mm-hmm. To the potential of skills-enabled candidate matching. I mean, these things are really exciting. I think that sourcers are going to see their workload change and potentially lighten. Maybe that means there's less sourcers because you can automate more of it, but there is no replacement for an excellent sourcing partner, especially at the executive level, right? So I think that you're going to see sourcing maybe continue to stay at the top of the food chain, working very closely with executive recruiters, and be the holder of intel, as opposed to just the candidate outreach engine, and be much more strategic in the work that they're doing and have the time to be much more strategic in the work that they're doing.
Yeah, I kind of see it as, if you look at the marketing world and marketing being top of funnel, right? Filling top of funnel with lots of, in this case, candidates. And you can put lots of pounds of flour into that bag, but it's not going to help you because you're trying to find one grain of flour in a gigantic bag.
Correct.
And so you have to do a lot of organizing of the data. You have to basically build a lot of benches. You have to build a lot of candidate pools. You have to manage your alumni pools. You have so many things that you can do that create that, I think you used it just in time, that create the ability to have that slate of just in time, but not be just in time because you've done all that research and you've used those tools at your disposal.
And you've been nurturing those relationships, right? You've been nurturing, and you have, critical intelligence on those potential candidates that helps a recruiter attract them. Right. And that partnership becomes even more meaningful in that area. So I completely agree with you.
And the data you have on these people is insane. Like now, I mean, not just LinkedIn, but there are so many amazing sources of trawling the internet and seeing all their presentations and all the videos about them and all the news about people, and being able to aggregate that into a portfolio of who is this person that I might probably hire or might hire, and making sure that they are the right fit or could be. It's just incredible, the data that's available.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm excited for the sourcing functions. I do think they're transforming. I wonder if they're going to remain centralized in many organizations, or if they're decentralized and work more with segments or functions as opposed to, just one sort of central group. And that's in sort of the larger corporations. But again, like I think you can't replace good sourcing, especially at the executive level, and you can't replace that exceptional partnership that you develop with the sourcer at the executive level.
And that's always been the push-pull of the decentralized HR group, right? Is that, where does that HR group fit? I mean, obviously the generalist and the recruiting functions have been so close to the business that sometimes you can't extricate them, and probably don't want to, because they've built that relationship with the business leaders. But if they don't have some kind of centralized source hub, then you're building strength in the spokes and not potentially sharing that strength, especially with all that data, across the organization.
And that we'll get to what there's roles for that, right? There's a different way of thinking about that. There is, maybe your sourcing leader is much heavier on data integration, data lakes, data architecture, technology implementation than they are an expert sourcer. and they're bringing together all of the resources so that information can be broadly shared, can be tagged, can be updated in real time, so that, the classic I'm going to dial over one sourcer's candidate to another doesn't happen, but also that the intel gets out of that sourcer's brain and into a system. And that's always, that's the age-old problem with the CRM, is you can bring the greatest CRM to a sourcing team, but they won't use it. So crack that problem, and that should be the TA sourcing leader's job.
Yeah, got it.
Going further up, recruiters. So this is, sort of my observations. I think recruiter rec loads are going to increase as all the tools that I've described above are brought to bear. There's going to be an expectation that you're going to be able to meet your KPIs on time to fill, as opposed to maybe they're not, or maybe this offer is too delicate or something like that. You're going to be able to get to a much more replicable process that will give you predictive demand control.
Predictive demand control. Important set of words.
Yes. Do you want me to go deeper on that one?
Yes, please.
Okay. And I'll get to this in a little bit, right? But I do think that workforce planning belongs with talent acquisition and not with data analytics or sitting out there somewhere in HR. I think it belongs with talent acquisition for two reasons. One is that talent acquisition needs to know what it's going to be doing, so that they can staff their organization appropriately and mitigate the pain of, up and down staffing, that they can invest in the right technology and build their own strategy. But I think that if you can predict accurately what you're going to hire for, and that you can then subsequently predict accurately the capacity for which you can actually execute on that hiring, which is the part of the equation that's been eluding a lot of companies these days, then that work actually becomes predictive, and you can control demand. You can pulse it up and down by saying, hey, we're going to do that in the third quarter because we need to do these other 5 roles in the front.
Right.
We need to design, we need to thoughtfully design that interaction model between workforce planning and TA. And again, this is why I advocate for workforce planning sitting underneath TA. But ideally, it's a automatic system, right? You're able to then pulse, you're able to assign recs appropriately. You don't need human intervention there. You know what people's functions are. You know what their expertise is. You know what their output is. We don't have that really well as TA leaders across the board. Organizations have built it in fits and starts, but they haven't really systematized it, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Yeah. I want to go back to one of the points you're making over and over again, which is incredible, which is that workforce planning belongs in TA, belongs with the recruiters. Is that a skill set that they have to develop, or is that bringing those workforce planning people into? Okay.
Both. Recruiters need to think holistically about, they're not just filling the one role, but what does the business actually need? They actually, and the business needs to also give that purview, that information to the recruiter. So that symbiosis needs to be really working very well, so that the recruiter can think about, oh gosh, this is the other talent that I need to think about for this client, because I'm focusing on making their business successful, not just this hire, right? Workforce planning is the engine, the data that helps a recruiting organization function effectively. It provides the information that you would need to say, okay, great, I want to take this from a highly manual process to an automated process. This is my business case. This is the throughput. This is the output. These are the tools necessary. You can't transform in TA without access to workforce planning. And I believe that TA is in a transformational state and is going to be there for probably the next 5 to 6 years.
Interesting. I think the CFO's office would probably agree with you, given the fact that they probably don't want to have too many cooks in the kitchen. And they probably want to work with the people who understand the process and understand the intricacies of the rec approval.
Yeah, and I would say that workforce planning is more than just headcount, right?
Of course.
You start to add in skills, for example, right? That shouldn't sit with the finance organization. They're not going to know what to do with skills, the skills of the future and how to staff for it and design for it. But a TA organization can develop a strategy to actually effectively execute on it.
Oh, yeah. No, what I meant was that the power of the purse strings with the CFO.
Oh,
And they probably want one neck to choke. And
100%. Yeah.
And the recruiting function already has the ear and the relationship with the business leader. Then they're probably a pretty good, I wouldn't say intermediary, they're probably a good place for that to belong so that they can interface with them once. Here are your approved recs for now. Here's what this is going to look at over the next 12 months, 12, 18 months. And here's our hiring plan.
You're talking about, what we would say with some of these big HCMs, position management and the challenge of position management, and that it appears to not necessarily be owned by one group.
No, it's clunky because HRIT doesn't know what the hell to do with it.
Yes, that's right. I completely agree. Whereas it's a useful tool for both TA and finance. And so could we agree on an owner and enable that through good workforce data?
Yeah. I've worked with so many HRIT folks who get frustrated by position management, and HR leaders just say, we have to do it because they didn't decide it. They didn't want it, but they need to do it because that's what finance has forced on them. And now they have to implement it in their HCM, and they have to live with it with all their processes, but their processes were never built with that, but they have to retrofit it now. And so,
and what they're doing to retrofit, in my experience, is they're just taking all their offline processes and putting them into a journey or a map inside the system, which unbelievably frustrates clients, right? And what do you mean I got to wait, 6 weeks to get approved for a position that I know I have approval for?
Exactly. You and I could do an entire podcast on that, by the way.
Would love to.
Okay, we'll hold you to that, Sarah. Let's get to question 3, because I think this is where it kind of brings it all home, which is, if you're talking to a room full of CHROs, what's your advice to them regarding where talent acquisition's headed?
So TA leaders, and let's just start with TA. TA is no longer about super recruiters, right? Like, you need that skill set inside your recruiting organization. But to have a really effective TA organization, you need to invest in them to create a true metrics-driven, data-literate technology and management skill set and experts. TA needs to understand all the levers that they have at their disposal to identify and attract the best talent for their organizations at the time that they're needed. And that means giving them exposure as well to talent development, right? And where does, talent development end and talent acquisition begin? Typically at sort of that, who owns training, right? It's usually at that conversation where there's some sort of scuffle around who owns it. And what I would say is flip that all on your head and think more about skills, and think more about who is enabling skills inside your organization. And it is TA and talent development. And wouldn't it be great if they were both speaking the same language, using the same data, and driving to the same results, and completely aligned? And that is the vision for the new talent development organization. And it could be, you have learning in there. Learning could end up being a delivery function. It depends on how you want to structure your organization. But when you flip everything on its head and think skills first, it completely changes the structure of your organization. So that's the first thing I'd say.
Let me touch that first before we get to the second thing, because we deal in a world right now, especially where too many HR leaders are having to listen to the CFOs and the business leaders say, we need to manage profitability, and therefore, instead of people being an asset, they're being looked at as a head that I can cut, or an expense that I have to get rid of, and not, I have a great group of people, they've supported our organization, they've performed admirably over the past 10 years, and I'm going to upskill and reskill them because I trust them, because I've got good workers, I've got a great workforce, and I have assets. Instead of treating them like assets, they're being treated like, pardon the word, cattle. And these are the ones that have to go to slaughter now. And I feel very strongly about this because we've been talking about upskilling and reskilling on this show for a long time now. And I keep seeing headlines of, a CEO, lays off X number of people to maintain profitability. And it's just
I think we're
disappointing.
managing quarter to quarter right now.
Unfortunately, yeah.
And I think that has been true for quite some time. The great CEOs enabled by great HR executives are thinking long term. They're thinking around, okay, great, what are the skills of the future that I need inside this organization? And then they're looking for someone to deliver a strategy of, do I buy those skills? Can I develop those skills with an investment and then help me build a business case to help me understand what the expense is that I need to actually get us from A to B in terms of the skills of the future. I do see that in many of the CEOs that I have worked with, and I'm really proud of that work. But I also see exactly what you're talking about. And it is, rolling, when people are getting laid off because, the layoff dates at this point, because it's so predictable.
Yeah.
They shed talent. They shed talent as opposed to reutilizing talent. And that is all because they don't have a skills first view of what kind of skills do they need inside the organization and what kind of skills does their organization currently have. And skills mapping is something, it's a step that I think many, many HR leaders need to focus on, not just as like a nice to have, or I'm going to add it to my budget and maybe we'll do it, and sort of like, but build a skills first strategy, because that is what is going to transform your business, especially if you're in knowledge work. Today, you have to have an understanding of the capability of your organization, because their work is going to change dramatically over the next 3 to 5 years.
Sarah, though, that is an extremely expensive proposition to do that skills mapping and to keep it alive. I've done that with
it can be, especially if you're doing like a traditional job architecture approach.
Exactly.
There are lots of great tools today that actually can enable skills mapping that doesn't need to be tied to a skills matching, right?
Mm-hmm.
But starting with the data, sort of like the data placemat to your HR organization that says like, hey, you've got this cluster of skills in these particular groups, and you're telling me based on your business strategy that you need these clusters of skills from these specific groups. I can now tell you where that exists inside our organization. I can tell you where we want to invest money in terms of recruiting that talent. And then I can tell you that, hey, I'm either going to go out and buy or build a learning tool that is going to transform our organization. And we're going to have metrics and measurement along the way. You can't have that conversation, though, without that placemat of understanding your current skill set.
Absolutely. And by the way, AI is getting very involved in being able to help you with that. So it does become less expensive.
It becomes less expensive, and it becomes less time consuming. And, time is money, as we always know, right? But it becomes a lighter lift for the HR organization, and it becomes harder to argue with. Jobs architecture work, and especially the surveys that go into job architecture work, really creates questions. It's a really sort of qualitative, it's human stories as opposed to data. And that always comes with questions.
But it's also very data rich and good, to your point before, good data scientists, good architects can actually pull that apart and make it very useful. Based on the context and the natural language models that they're using.
So that's I would tell HR executives skills first and invest in that. I would also tell them to do some introspection about their own skill set, because I do believe that the HR leader of the future is technology fluent, if not technology first. HR is going to be enabled by technology. You need to understand the data. You need to understand the implementation time cycles, the investment, the type of team that you need. And it's a rare combination of someone who maybe has traveled up the technology path and then can cross over to HR. But I'd say it's an even rarer combination for someone who's traveled up the HR path that has moved over to technology. So invest in yourself. Take the learning opportunities seriously. Consider, certificates, the same advice you would give to anyone else, but you need to be able to advise your CEO on investments needed across the organization as it comes to technology and people.
Yeah, let's give a shout out to IREM, who has been around forever, which is basically the HR technology organization. And it's gone through cycles, but hopefully it's back and it's better than ever. So. Sarah, this has been fascinating, just an amazing conversation. We could talk about this stuff all day. I think one of the things that we might want to do in our part two, if I don't speak French, so pardon me.
It's like that's part two. It's fine.
Is to explore further the need for that transformation of the not just TA organization, but the entire HR organization around skills, around data mapping, and around process mapping. So we'll have you back for that.
I'd love to. I'd probably bring my business partner for that as well. But we are spending a lot of time with CHROs today, advising them on their organization of the future and taking them through some design sessions and maturity assessments to really help them understand, what do you need? Because it's probably not what you got. And I'm not saying that HR leaders aren't good at what they're doing in terms of assessing their organization. They're excellent at it.
Right.
But they may be just focused on their organization as opposed to how the world is transforming around them.
And it is transforming around them. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you all for listening. Take care and stay safe. Thank you for listening to the HR Data Labs podcast. Don't forget to hit subscribe and share it with your network. Also, check out the HR Data Labs Brown Bag Lunch every Friday on LinkedIn. You can also check out the recordings on Spotify. Thank you, take care, and stay safe.